Went to school for primary and basic and so forth?
First of all, I left home with a handicap, more than just inadequate formal schooling. I had an education, but I didn't have the schooling to go with it. And I also had hay fever, ragweed, sneeze. You probably have been out shocking wheat in the ragweed season and sneeze and blow and then set a shock down and bundle down and what have you. Thank God I was shipped off to Texas. By the way, I didn't have the schooling requirements to get in as a cadet. And so I took an exam. You had to take an exam, and I failed it once, and I think I failed it twice, and maybe the third time. And I must break in for just a moment because I want you to pass this on to your grandchildren if you're around, or any kids that are, it's a kind of a nice time to introduce it. You know, people who are shallow talk about the weather. People who talk a little deeper talk about people. And other people talk about ideas. And I don't know whether I was old enough yet to have an idea, but I did. And it was very similar to another kid that I heard about. And he wanted a job, and he was just out of school. And excuse my deviation, but I think it's very important because I think that the time when I didn't pass the exam and didn't have the formal schooling, that I had an idea. This kid says, "Dad, they're going to interview and I need this job." And he said, "I'll get it for you." He said, "I want to go myself." He said, "They're interviewing tomorrow at 7 o'clock. He got down there at 6:30 and there were 30 people in line ahead of him. And he said he had heard that if you kind of concentrate and think and say a little prayer and hang your head, maybe you'd get a good idea. And he did that. He went to the head of the line, asked the secretary for a piece of paper, and he wrote a note on it, and she gave it to her boss. And it read like this: "Dear sir, I'm the 31st guy in line. Don't make a decision until you hear from me." Now I'm going to bust forward just a little bit. But I had an idea that if I couldn't get in the United States Army Air Corps, maybe I could get in the Royal Canadian Air Force. So I drove to St. Louis. That's 240 miles and a lot of bundles of hay in the meantime, and got over there to sign up. Before they called, I'd gone back and I'd failed the examination enough times that I could bone up on it, and I finally passed it. And was called in and went to the Gulf Coast, went to San Antonio, to Hill Wing, then went from there to Fort Worth, to Hicksfield, and then to Majors Field at Greenville, and then to Aloe Field in Victoria, and Alamogordo for gunnery, and back to Aloe for some P-40 time, and that was it. And I didn't have much time. I left there, I didn't have much time. I went to OTU and A-36s and before that we were called out, and I went over and got shot down on the first flight and came back and people were getting out of the service and what have you. And so I went to Laredo, Texas, got the best break in my life. They said, "You can't be a B-17 instructor, you only have 450 hours or something like that." And I went to a thing called a pinball machine program where you had RP-63s painted orange and armor plated, and they shoot real bullets at them, frangibles. Man alive, I had a little bit of time in it, and I flew the YB-40 and everything, and then the war was over and they didn't have a requirement for this. This is a wonderful development. And that gave me an insight to what research and development was all about. I had broken my leg when I played basketball in my senior year, and I think maybe I had a heart murmur, but since I couldn't play basketball, I think my heart healed So that break was a break. I came back from combat, didn't have much time, so I got assigned to a research and development program. That was a big break. It made me start to wonder whether you should be so down about the things that seemed to be working against you at the time. Well, get down to Eglin Field, and people were getting out and what have you, and I thought, boy, I'm going to find myself back up there plowing. And I started thinking about the warm, walking barefoot in the warm soil and what have you, and all the John Deere tractor and the 1020 and the heat and how cold it was pulling stalks and what. And I thought, boy, you better do something or you'll be back there just being a farm boy. And so Homer Capehart was a senator from Indiana. And I thought, why don't you write a senator? So I sat down and I said, Dear Senator Capehart, I like what I see, but I don't have much to offer. I don't have much formal schooling. I don't have much flying time. I hardly have any combat career, but I'd like to stay. And I got a Dear John letter. You all had them for different jobs or what have you. And they said in the squadron, you'll be court-martialed. And I didn't know much about court-martialing, but it had a bad connotation, and so I said, well, if I'm gonna be court-martialed, I'm going to write somebody important. Dear President Truman. No secretary, no nothing. Just handwritten. It's in the records in Washington. I saw it once, still there. And the letter I got was, your letter to the President has been referred to me, answer, Adjutant General Jackson. And I was the second guy in a squadron to get a regular commission. If we live in a free country, let's exercise that freedom. And why don't we get that through to the kids? Really? If we are live in a free country and we're all Americans, why are we afraid to talk to the fellow standing in line at the bank, huh? A lot of things like that, they didn't come through until I was 75. I started to listen to it. Yes, so have a good idea. Think hard and say a little prayer and have a good idea. And that was a part of what I wanted to cover, but probably in a different talk. But I'm sorry, Phil.
We're not. It's really, Dennis, just a second if I may, hold that question, because a couple of things that I think those of you who follow aviation and know something about the years at Edwards Air Force Base know about the B-58 and you know about the B-70, and there were at least two very special days in Joe's life related to the B-70, and I'd like you to share the highlights, Joe, if you could, that day. I think it was in June 1966 when you really saved, with the help of a lot of ground crew people, a B-70 with a paperclip, a hammer, or pliers, flashlight.
Yeah, of course, the first spatial day was 37 years ago, the 21st of September, and when our first flight in the Valkyrie with Al White was the pilot, the company pilot, North American Rockwell, and I was an Air Force pilot with him. So that was a big day, the first day. Things didn't work right. Gear wouldn't come up, engine had to shut down an engine. We were planning contract-wise to go supersonic on that flight. Ridiculous. Didn't make any difference. Don't get your dander up. The airplane knows it's not going supersonic, and so they didn't get the incentive. That's all there is to it. It's very simple. Get down safely. Get out safely. Caught fire on landing, and we caught fire twice. Hallelujah. As a result, the shuttle doesn't catch fire now. If you look at the landing gear problems on the 70 in detail, tiptoe landing gear and a lot of stuff, you'd say, I don't believe it. And I often think of, with the Hustler, the B-58 wheels, they roll up at 4,000 RPM. And when a tire would come unglued, boy, so would the rim go up in and puncture the fuel cell, and you got fire just like on the Concorde. So, but after through, that's research and development. That's what it's all about. It's finding out that new ideas don't work. And by the way, if you're in that business, you sign up and you don't like it, there are no rules on quitting. No rules on quitting. But remember, if you walk out, there'll be about 15 guys standing at the door ready to take your job. A lot of that. I experienced that an awful lot. Well, that first flight was really a memorable day. Then the first time at Mach 3. We worked our way up to Mach 3 on the old first airplane, and that was a great day. On that day, 10 feet of the wing skin came off, about 18 inches wide. And you said, "Did you know that?" And I said, "Would you know it if you woke up with an elephant in bed with you?" You better believe we knew it. And I think a shallow bank, you roll out of a bank shallow and you punch down into Mexico, and that's the least of our worries. And we got back. Time after time, we'd get back, maybe with 4 engines out. The whole failures of all that thing, and I keep thinking that the Hustler, you see, the B-58 was the first bomber to go that fast, Mach 2, 1,300 mile an hour. The previous bomber was a B-51. If you ever want to look at an airplane ahead of its time, that was the B-51. And it did about 9.6. It could deliver weapons at 9.6. So the Hustler went out to Mach 2. Therefore, the wing had to be thin. Therefore, the housing for the landing gear had to be shallow. Therefore, the gear had to be thin. Therefore, the wheels were small. Therefore, they turn up fast. All these things go, and you have to recognize that. And we had about 116 airplanes, and we lost 13. And I tell you, it was to learn how to fly that airplane and investigate the accidents, and the simulator didn't work, and it put gray hairs in your head. And but it was a fantastic, exciting machine. The Hustler was really as exciting as the P-38. Some airplanes really exciting, and I always thought the Lightning was an exciting airplane, and the Hustler was, and the SR-71. No, but the 70, I have to tell you that it's not all good, because as you well know, we had a mid-air collision and we lost one of the airplanes. Well, that gives me an opportunity to introduce the word contrast. I think contrast is one of the most powerful words in my life, especially since 9/11. Edith and Archie Bunker, 2 dear friends of mine from All in the Family, introduced contrast to me. Archie came in off the street and it was snowing and he was sort of beat up, and he said, "Edith, if there's a God up there and he's looking down here like you say he is, why does he let all that bad happen?" And Edith said, "Arch, it's so if we ever get to heaven, we'll be able to notice a difference." That kind of started it, thinking about that. But I want to tell you, another dear friend, Robinson Reisner. If you don't know him, you need to. He had 7.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. I've talked to Robbie on the phone 3 or 4 times. I talked to him first to tell him how his book, The Passing of the Night, if you haven't read it, get it so you can put it in your suitcase if you go to the hospital and you're feeling bad. Reisner's book will take care of it. It helps Don Rodewald. Well, some of you I bet know Don Rodewald. He crashed in 1954. He's a paraplegic. He flew his own single-engine airplane around the world 30 years later in 1984. Don Rodewald. He lives at Paradise Valley, just outside of Travis. I became acquainted with Robinson Reisner to get in the book for Rodewald to read, because he has decubitus ulcers, bed sores. And when he gets real low, he picks up Reisner's book. And talking to Reisner one day, I said, "Robbie, let's talk about the advantages of getting older." And he said, "Joe, besides understanding and patience and what have you," he said, "my appreciation is unbelievably high." The light didn't come on in my head then. but Roberto Benigni turned it on. It's a Wonderful Life. He stood up and walked on the back of the chairs to get his Oscar. And he got up on the stage and he thanked his parents for introducing him to poverty. And then the light came on. My God, the distance from the lows to the highs in our life are the measure of our appreciation when we get older. Maybe. See, I'm 80 and I don't know that much for sure, but that's the way I assess it. Therefore, it gave me, why should I hustle and worry a lot about if young Daniel, grandson, has a lot of problems, our grandson, why should I go and help him all the time and pull him up out of the mire and what I call down in the valley? Let him work it out himself. I don't want to deny him of the appreciation when he comes 80. Maybe there's something there. I'm not sure. But I'll tell you, in my life, the lows of the Depression on the farm in Indiana and the lows of being in Greece with the mountains with that crew, we were without 3 of the 4 F's that sustain you. The 4 F's that sustain you are family, friends, food, and freedom. We were without 3 of those, but there are 10 of us who are friends. Your friends can sustain you. That's a lot of what we got right now. We've got food, we've got friends, we've just had a little bit of freedom taken away from us. Man, we ought to be able to max the course on this one. Really. So it's just sort of a lot of wonderful people. And I have an altogether different little message on the importance of things that people say if you listen. A friend of mine said that she could cope with Washington, the heat of Washington, the rain of Seattle, the cold of the Arctic, and the heat of the desert, following her husband around, who's a friend of mine, because she had heard an aunt say that you should learn how to blossom no matter where you're planted. I'd never heard that before, but I thought that was powerful. And then a little time later, a wife of a coach that I know who coached the Hoosiers at Milan, Indiana. He couldn't be there. She accepted an honor for him. And she said if he could be there, he'd probably say something like, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. Wow, you start loading this up and that book gets heavy, man. And you try to live up to it. And another guy says, I'm sorry for the things I've said, and I'm sorry for the things I've done, but I've never been sorry for being kind. Well, tremendous, the contrast. And I'll tell you, the contrast between Mach 3 at 70,000 feet and a few days later standing in the rubble of the crash of that airplane on the desert floor, and you've lost 2 dear friends, man, there's a great contrast there. And you want to know what caused that accident? We probably will never know exactly. But it's pretty obvious that Joe's airplane got in contact with the 70. But I want you to know this, that if you want to know who approved it first, you're looking at him. That's the way it went during the investigation. That's the way it's going now, and that's the way it'll. You know, General Electric called, I won't give you the guy's name, because he's a wonderful guy, and said, Joe, do you think that we could have at the end of another mission, we could have a formation flight of GE-powered airplanes? We had done this with a Sabreliner for North American, and I've often wondered, why did you make that choice? It was obviously a bad choice now, but the reason that I made it, I want you to know. As I said, yes, I don't see why not. And the request didn't stop there. It had to go higher. Although I was a test director, I had boss, and my boss had a boss, and what have you. but I don't want to kick it upstairs. I want to keep it right where it was. You know, test pilots have a love-hate relationship with contractors. They love them because they make the airplanes that you fly, and you'd never get to fly it if they didn't make it, so you love them for that. But when you've got, say, problems, repeated problems, and you have to take somebody to Arlington, and you got to meet the family before the news gets to it, no, there sort of gets to be a little bit of a hate relationship if nothing's been done to fix the problem. General Electric, and I came up through J33s and J35s and J47s and J57s and R2800s and R4360s and R2800s and 4360s, Pratt & Whitney. After a while with a J57, you get to be a P&W man. They start out rugged, and then if they see they can cut back a little, they cut back a little. GE started out petite power, tin can, sheet metal, but hotter than a pistol. J47 lagged a little too much for a go-around. But boy, man, they started that J79, and that J93 and the Valkyrie. Wow. And I didn't know any of the GE chief people, except Bruno Bruckmann, the guy who was the engine man for us. When they turned over a J93 for the Valkyrie to fly, it was ready. And you do that, and you have failures, and the engine handles it, and after a while, you feel good about it. And I think I felt good at that time about GE. How could I turn true friends down? And I said yes. And I've regretted it ever since. And I think of Joe Walker and Carl Cross practically every day of my life. But you know what that does for me? That gives me a freedom that you can't get any other way. The truth shall set you free. It's got to be the truth. But you gain freedom as a result. And I hope young people who hear that never forget it. You don't have to change the story. If it's straightforward and honest, you don't have to change it. They won't be bugging you except those who don't believe the truth. They'll say something's wrong. But anyhow, contrast. And now that's a part of what I think is this appreciation level at my current age of all those highs and lows in the life, because I left home looking for excitement, and that's what I got.
I just want to put a finishing touch on two of the things he's told. One was Robbie Reisner, who is a fighter ace in Vietnam and so forth, and still very active. And the other thing is, on that B-17 that he flew his first and only combat mission when they were shot down, it was a successful forced landing. All 10 crew members survived, evaded, and went through amazing experiences for over 4 months, and finally escaped in an Italian subchaser. And it's and they all were intact, all these 10 crewmen. And some are still with Joe. One guy, I think the bombardier, lives in the Sacramento area. Anyway, that's the subject of a book. He didn't write it, but it was written after interviewing him. It's called Aircraft Down. It's available. The other thing is, Joe, we'll take a few more minutes. I know it's getting late, but we got a late start. So would you share with everyone the meaning and the characteristics and the danger associated with the coffin corner?
Yes, there's a guy by the name of Mark Natola. Interesting that he's in the medical field, and he heard that a guy who was writing, a lieutenant colonel who was writing a story about the B-47 had passed on, and that the book had been dropped, the way I get it. This may be a nickel's worth off, but I've talked to Mark 2 or 3 times and what have you, and he kept asking about the B-47. And the B-47 2280 at the Air Force Museum, right under the Valkyrie and around the Hustler 458. And we did the labs maneuver in the airplane. But I've always thought that the B-47 was the bomber pilot's shooting star. Up there, visibility, reminded me an awful lot of the P-80. But the B-47 taught me a lot. One of was Coffin Corner. I just made a copy of the performance page on the B-47 to take to a guy by the name of Willie Campbell, who we flew together at Dayton, and to look at if you weighed 100,000 pounds and you were at 50,000 feet, what your cruise Mach number would be, and if you slowed down a bit or you moved up a bit, what your buffet range would be. And you'd be cruising at 7.5 Mach number, and if you back down to 0.73, you get low speed buffet, and if you went up to from 7.5 to 7.7, you get high speed buffet. Now, I'd never encountered that before. A B-17 you didn't. You never had the performance and the altitude, nor the B-29 or what. So as I remember the B-47, that was one of the introductions of the 47. And a 47, you had to have a spatial discipline, I thought, for the approach speed for your gross weight. And if you were sloppy jockey, you could choose which end of the runway you wanted to burn on. And that guy, Mark Natola, who's never flown a B-47, he said to me, "Joe, it sounds like, although you're highly complimentary of Boeing and Boeing airplanes and what have you, the B-47 made you a better pilot." I'd never thought about that before, but he's right. I think maybe I wouldn't have survived the B-52. I got to stop for a minute. I could have probably, because the 52 is a lot like the 17. It has the quality of forgiveness built into it. The B-17's timing was great. It was a little over-designed. It had that extra 15%, what I call the quality of forgiveness. That's the greatest thing you can design in an airplane. When as the old fuds in the back of the room were challenging the engineer, he said, "If we want you to add about 15%, in the case of you wrong. In case the mechanic is wrong, in the case of the pilot is wrong, add about 15%. By the way, if the B-17 and the B-24 went up against competition today, the 17 would never fly. The bean counters would put the B-24 in the air. Performance-wise and everything, it would outdo it. It'd carry a heavier load and everything and all that. But they don't compute forgiveness. And so the B-17, I've always thought, and I've said very little here personal tonight, but I want to tell you one thing. I think the B-17, as far as stability is concerned, the B-17, stability is a desire of an airplane to return to where it was. The B-17 went one step further. It didn't want to leave where it was at. And that when you're on final approach and the visibility is about a quarter of a mile and it's snowing and what have you, or you're on the final approach to the southern tip of Corfu and you only got one engine going, that's the kind of thing you want to go in with. But the B-52, if you probably say, what's the best airplane that you ever flew? From a taxpayer standpoint, B-52 first flew in 52, and it's 003 and 008 down there in the mothership. We dropped the X-15, the lifting body, and everything from it. By the way, one of the great joys of my life was to drop Pete Knight, who's a senator. The day is the 3rd of October, 1967, and he went 6.7, 4,520 mile an hour. He's from Noblesville, Indiana, and I'm from Rushville, Indiana. And that was a great team. What a great day. And I saw Pete this past weekend, and I'll see him next month. Keep in touch with him all the time. But those were glorious days at Edwards. Glorious days, and at Wright-Patterson. And I must go back for a moment and hit one thing that, in my notes, is a farm boy from Indiana wasn't very schooled in management. It's just your dad and yourself, and if you're lucky, you have a hired hand once in a while. Not much management involved. All leadership, and it comes from dad. Most dads could boss about 5 people. That's what they said in leadership school. Then we got in the 60s, And you turned it around in management school, they tried to figure out how 5 people could boss 1 worker. And we're wondering why we weren't getting things done and it cost so much. Today I find there's a lot of leadership management going on, and that's good. The combination of the two is very, very powerful. But as a kid off of the farm, more leadership, I didn't know about it, and I went out in combat and you had the mechanic. And you went to these various places like Laredo and fly the pinball and go to Eglin, and there's a mechanic, the pilot and the mechanic. You went to Wright-Patterson, they had a new breed of people up there called aeronautical engineers. I tell you folks, I wish I had played football because it teaches you teamwork better than basketball. I majored in basketball when I was a senior in Indiana. And basketball, you're not that much of a team, or baseball, like football. Man, when you get that flight crew and that maintenance crew, that crew chief, and then you get that engineer from those red brick buildings over right field together, they can perform miracles. And that's the way it was at Edwards in the morning when you're getting the mothership ready for the X-15 flight. It's real early, 4:30 or 5. I'm great at that. This time I'm normally no good at all. But still get up early. And all around that airplane, you hear all kinds of problems. The uprange weather doesn't look too good. There's a C-130 that they can't get off, and we got a chase airplane that doesn't look too good. And nobody gets stirred up, but you just see a lot of bodies around underneath that mothership and what have you. You look down there, and you don't know whether they're contractor or NASA or Air Force. They're just all people pulling as a team together. And then after the sun comes up and weather clears up and the chase and the uprange airplane, wow. When I lay down and think about that and go to sleep, that is the most wonderful thing in the world, is teamwork, people pulling together. Very little friction.